So apparently my previous video on Kaiserreich was a lie. User Ooga Booga left a comment on my first Kaiserreich video saying that I mixed up official lore and the Kaisercat lore. I had no idea that Kaisercat was an independent entity, or I guess they're just fans of the game? They've made hours of Kaiserreich content, music, and even official-looking merch, and they're not representing the game's lore faithfully? I'd really appreciate it if someone could make a follow-up comment on this down below to clarify everything, because I don't really know what's going on in the game. As I said, I've never played it. So from now on in this video, and any others that might come after it talking about the quote-unquote Kaiserreich lore, I will be referring to the Kaisercat lore. Sorry for the misunderstanding, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Just as a quick recap from the previous episode, we are currently in mid-1919 and the Germans are on the offensive. Watch my previous video on the Kaiserreich lore if you haven't already, if you still need persuading to see why this makes no sense. Anyway, Germany managed to encircle and capture Amiens. This was just a footnote in my previous video, but when I thought about it, it makes zero sense. There had already been 3 battles around Amiens, in our timeline all of them being Allied victories. Seeing as the Allied 100-day offensive fails in the Kaiserreich timeline, it is more feasible that Germany would be able to capture the town, but it was just too heavily dug in by this point in the war. They also managed to encircle and capture Verdun. Have you ever heard of Verdun before? The time where over 1 million German soldiers tried to capture the town on fortifications over 9 months and failed? Well, in the summer of 1919, the Germans are simply able to waltz around it and the French surrender.
The French military, despite rapidly collapsing support on the home front, are convinced that their enemy must be equally desperate, that the German lines, so close to the capital, must represent an opponent overextended and driven to the breaking point.
Yeah, you'd think so, wouldn't you? Continuing their advance, the Germans quote-unquote drive a wedge through British and French supply and communication lines. You're saying that the Germans got so far that they managed to sever all supply and communication lines between Britain and France, which has been built up by over 5 years at this point. You're saying that they can't just go around the bulge of the German offensive, and that the British just pack up and leave?
Right, bruv, I know we've been fighting Jerry together for 5 years now, but it advanced a bit, so we'll be off now. Prefer Spain for me summer holidays anyway. Pardon?
In light of the abandonment by the British, France does one big last push which actually succeeds and manages to push the Germans back a bit. Wait a minute. You thought France could be militarily competent? The offensive fails and there are large mutinies on the front due to wave after wave of suicidal charges. Yes, the French army was notorious for the mutinies of 1917, but these only had around 100,000 men in them and they were over within days or weeks. So mutinies aren't unrealistic, but they wouldn't paralyze the French army, which had over 8 million men in it. You can give them the benefit of the doubt, but it's still quite a stretch. On the civilian side of things, there are general strikes and mysterious and spooky red flags with torches and cogs in the middle can be seen in the protests. It's called syndicalism, which is communism, but instead of establishing the workers' paradise through murdering people, you can just do it via trade unions and strikes. For the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to call it communism. Belgium also doesn't exist at this point and it surrenders, becoming a puppet of Germany. On the 12th of August 1919, the war in continental Europe finally comes to a close, and a few months later the peace is certified by the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. Call me pedantic, but really? Why not the Treaty of Hanover, or Nuremberg, or even Berlin if you can't think of any other city with palaces in Germany? When the war ends, Germany offers to buy up French and Belgian colonies in Africa and Asia. It's said that they buy them due to goodwill, but the French already despise the Germans, so why not just get them for free in the peace deal? It won't really change many feelings. Besides, there is already unrest in the Congo and Indochina, and the German economy cannot possibly manage to invest the money and manpower into these nations to create a profit. The purchases make no sense, but at least they managed to acknowledge the stupidity of them in the video. After the signing of the Treaty of Versailles in November, all hell breaks loose in France. Soldiers and civilians in the capital form the Commune of Paris under the Communist banner, and Lille also falls to the revolutionaries. I explained earlier why mutinies among the French army wouldn't come to much. though since France did lose the war, say an extra 200,000 to 300,000 soldiers at most would join in the mutiny. It's alternate history, and at this point it's really impossible to gauge how many would have rebelled, so once again, I will give them the benefit of the doubt. France has a civil war which lasts 2 years, and during that time, the nation completely falls to the communists, with the last of the nationalists, who are the opposition to the communists, fleeing to Algeria, which is ironic because they're all probably extremely racist. But, of course, the revolution won't just be contained to France, and if I have the sanity to make another video on this topic, it'll all be covered in that one.
It seems like pretty tough luck to fight for one's country and end up like this. I was in the Guards, and I think I know what you chaps went through out there in the Falklands. Well done.
Muchas gracias, señor.